Welcome on the show, Daniel.
Oh.
How's it going?
Yeah, not bad.
So welcome. This is the 2-year anniversary podcast. Man, it's been a while, bro.
Yeah, it's been
19 episodes in?
yeah, I think so.
19 episodes in.
Yeah, not
Man.
quite cracked 20 yet, but we're working on it.
I know. It's been awesome. I think, we've come a very, very long way of
Yeah.
changing and sort of seeing different points of views and all that. No, it's been crazy, and I want to thank you as well. You know, you do the work behind the scenes, and that's a lot of hard work. If you know how editing and stuff are, it's like requires time, you know. And
Yeah.
I want to be grateful to Daniel to doing that.
All good. I'm happy to be along for the ride. you know.
Yeah. That's been awesome. What are the highlights of the last year? So as you know, I've moved countries. I now live in Abu Dhabi. I attend New York University and I study maths and computer science. It's crazy. I think when you go from high school to university, you sort of see the difference in maturity levels and difference in like how independent people are, you know.
Yeah, completely different ball game, and I'm sure it's even different over there where you're at.
Yeah, no, for sure it is. Like,
Prestige schools,
no one
you know?
gives a shit if you don't do your work, you know.
Yeah,
It's like you give your own shit.
you're
like-
shooting yourself in the foot if you don't.
And I think it's sort of like that, bro.
Yeah, it's a good way to like weed people out if you're from the opposite perspective. If you're an employer and looking at like, if you can get through a degree that you're onto it enough to have managed that. So
True. However, the opposite is also true as well. You know, there are cases where people do not succeed in the traditional universities and yet do incredible things. However, people overstate
yeah,
that. You know,
they're very rare. And
very
then
rare.
those types of personalities that succeed in that sphere are going to be successful no matter what they do anyway.
Exactly, and like, man, there's some. I've seen some stupid stuff, and they're like, well, you know, Steve Jobs dropped out. You know,
So I'm just going to sit at smoke weed
you
every
know.
day.
If you actually study like
Yeah.
their life,
No,
you
the
realize
hustlers
like
from day one.
very, very early they were like onto it.
There's
and
something,
regardless,
special.
Like, I think there is that false narrative, and again, like there is content people out there like Prince EA and like there's something which do like a very, very, I don't know, a black and white task of framing school as being all bad.
Yeah,
And then the opposite of,
I
like,
guess
it's crazy.
that kind of stuff resonates with people kind of in that space, and
Yeah.
he says things that kind of articulates the way people feel, I guess. But when you're doing a monologue to a camera, there's no one there to kind of like, well, hold on, what about that? You know, like you kind of have the freedom to say whatever you want without anyone.
And that's about like the last year. You rarely realize the importance of building a narrative. The narrative that most people in positions of influence have is very, very deceptive.
Storytellers.
That's storytelling, and I think people will be like, "Nah, it doesn't work on me," but it works on everyone.
Yeah.
You just list down the people you listen to the most, and you realize that anything they say, we hold it to a higher accord than other things.
Yeah.
I think that's where, like, we're in that sort of space right now, and we've had this discussion before. Is like people do not realize the complexity of certain things.
Nuances.
The nuances.
There's no nuance these days in terms of how problems are presented,
For sure.
because everything's
Even social problems, bro.
Yeah.
Like what's going on in New Zealand, in the States, around the world. It's very, very easy to pick and choose what you want to read about and use the confirmation bias as a justifying mechanism.
to kind of like arm yourself to then go at people that believe the opposite, and it just creates divide, and you really get nowhere with it.
Bro, but it's so common.
Yeah, it
It's-
is the state of kind of social media and media in general,
Yeah. And so, like,
and that's the narrative of society.
exactly. The whole point, like this last year of the podcast, was to really, for me, it's more about like education. I want to do it because, you know, maybe you learn a lot of stuff. You sit down with people that are very, very good at what they do, and you talk to them and you really understand their thinking and their processes behind their thinking, and you get a sort of idea of how things work, even though you don't know it as intricate as the person explaining it.
They've done the nitty-gritty and they can then communicate it.
Yeah. Nonetheless,
Yeah.
complexity. That's the thing.
Well, you get that in the longer form, kind of. It allows for that.
Exactly. And when you're sitting there for an hour and a half, you can really talk to them about these complexities.
Not a 30-second soundbite, you know, like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was speaking with a Harvard professor who was episode 16, 17. But he was explaining this as well. The phenomenon of like, especially in foreign policy, people do not realize the complexities that exist within decision making. It's easy for us to really criticize the government, criticize individuals of making XYZ decisions, but like you have to really now and think and stop and be like, you know, would you do the same in the same circumstances with the same deck of hands and all this stuff?
And I think even with politics, because there's so many more layers of complexity in terms of like getting votes, getting funding, you gotta keep commercial investors happy. You gotta keep your voter base happy. Yeah.
Politics is like, man, like I think people have an inherent distrust of politicians, and it's unfortunate because those are the people representing high decision-making powers. But I think you got to understand, like, it's like if people that you have elected and you're not trustful of them, then the people that are, you know, there's not really much you can do for others, you know, if you don't have this inherent trust in the system and the politicians. And it's like you can't have trust without them having accountability and showcasing. But then again, people still are not aware fully of how the system itself works, and people can just play narratives all day long.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of how you perceive it. I guess as an individual, you can see like, okay, that's out of my control. I can try to just make the lives of the people and people around me better. Because it is easy to get bogged down with just looking at global news headlines coming out every 30 seconds. Like, it can overwhelm you.
Oh, for sure. There is a empathy fatigue going on.
Yeah.
Oh, right now, for sure.
Oh.
I don't know. I think the recent... And we're all impacted by it. Like, we cannot care about every single thing at the same time.
Yeah. And you're expected to, in a way, almost.
Yeah. And I dare say it. Our news has become American-central.
Yeah.
What we value and who we value and what problems we value has been and is, for the most part, Americanized.
And it's almost a form of entertainment now.
Yeah, and it's shocking. Yeah. I was talking to a friend just today about it, and we were saying that like there are many more problems going on around the world, especially socially, that are not being covered.
Yeah.
And there's a very, very good book by Robert Cialdini. He talks about persuasion, and he says that the importance of news broadcasters is not to make you think a certain way or about a certain thing, but there's this very nuance, is that they provide you all the options to think about. They do not make you select one, but they give you the options to select from, which gives you this other problem. If the news broadcasters are only giving us specific options,
that in itself,
we are inherently swayed to think about certain problems.
Even if you have a bunch of information and you throw it at, communicate it in a way that is unedited and raw.
Yeah.
Selecting your unedited and raw kind of stories in itself is a selection and an edit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's shocking.
Yeah.
When I heard about it, you really realize, like, wow, like, yeah. Like, if I have 5 options to choose from of what I care about or what information I see, I will not see the outcome minus the 5, the other possibilities of what I could see. Because we cannot see non-events or things that haven't happened.
Yeah.
We cannot
Perceive that.
see that or
Yeah.
even assess what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives us this really weird mechanism of like we are constantly shifted or touched upon to move a certain way, think a certain way, which is I don't know. That's a very problematic,
Yeah.
you know.
And it's not something that's addressed enough, really. And that's just another one of those problems you can add to the list.
Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah.
But then again, like when you sit down, you realize like, I think critical thinking. We talked about it as well, but like how much of that really goes on, you know?
Yeah.
Like how many people can confidently say that they are critical thinkers and can think critically when given certain problems? Like how many?
Yeah.
I think a small minority can confidently and
Yeah,
accurately say that.
I feel like if you asked everyone, a high percentage would be like, oh yeah, for sure, that's me. But yeah, it's really, how can you even know if you do it yourself?
You see, even those surveys are designed to be wrong.
Oh yes.
You know,
Surveys are a great way to
like you can
tell
lie
a story.
with surveys.
Yeah, they're a great way to.
Even if you can ask maybe 100 people and maybe 90 or 80% will say, yeah, I'm a very critical
Who are those
thinker,
90
and I
people
think
you asked, yeah.
because when you frame it in that way,
Mm.
what happens is that they look at all the scenarios or all examples of them critically thinking.
Yeah, they don't think of all
However,
the other ones.
They do not
missed.
think
Yeah.
about the non-events or the times they have not.
Because it's not
thought
been
of it.
pointed out to them.
Exactly. So it is
Yeah.
a confirmation bias of selecting information to fit the narrative of what you want to think. Because decisions are already made and evidence is collected afterwards.
Mm.
However, the
Yeah.
opposite should happen. If evidence is gathered and then decisions are made. And at a very personal level, that happens, quite frankly, every single day.
Yeah, for sure. Because then you kind of, there's things where you can like take a breath and analyze things, but there's moments in your life where it's just your gut instinct, quick reaction, quick. You know, like you can't actually overanalyze every single decision you make.
True. Yes, of course.
So inherently, you are gonna.
Yeah, but you can't see. The thing is, you shouldn't overanalyze every single decision. Like whether you eat Cheetos or Pringles
Yeah.
does not give. It's
Doesn't
not
require-
a significant
yeah.
decision.
Event, yeah.
You shouldn't
Yeah.
associate the calories, the starch, etc., etc.
Research the brand.
However,
yeah.
when you're making a decision of
Who you're voting for.
who you're voting for,
Or,
that's
yeah,
one thing.
yeah.
Or, what types of expensive products you're choosing.
Yeah.
There is like this, there's a curve of which things you should care about.
Oh, yeah,
The more
there's
higher value,
Decisions
the more
have different
time you should
weights.
spend.
Yeah.
But again, it's weird how even that on a baseline level is missing. You know, very
Yeah.
unfortunate. But yeah, no, the podcasts have really, shown you that there is a much more thinking involved.
Yeah, and the value of just long form, you kind of when you're at NYU and you got access to these. I mean, they're not only professors; they have a career behind that, and that's how they've got to this position. And you got an hour just to sit down with them, and it's invaluable.
Oh, for sure. I'm honestly really grateful for whoever those guys agreed to sit down with the time.
Yeah.
But no, it is. One thing you realize as well, like especially when I interviewed the director,
That was
Emmy.
awesome.
very, very bright dude, and he's filming his next movie now. You realize, like, the things in movies we take for granted, they are calculated. They are calculated to the fucking dot.
Especially his stuff.
Yes.
With they're not actors, and
no,
the level
it
of that
it
was
is
crazy.
calculated.
Yeah.
And you realize, like, the sophistication needed to pull off things like that.
Yeah. The planning and the pre.
And again, we don't see that as
No.
like viewers.
You
Like,
see an end product.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I was amazed. I was like, wow, like this guy, he is truly like top of his game.
master of
because,
his
wow,
craft.
like that takes fuckloads of dedication. And it took him 10 years, about 10 years to write the script
Yeah.
on and off. Talk about a fucking long-term project, bro. know.
The iterations that would have
And
went
I
through.
asked him, like, how the hell did he keep motivated? And he was like, no, it was never a rush, you know, like, we were always
Right.
going to work on it, like this and that. And it reminded you of, like, wow, like, maybe I should be a bit more patient.
Yeah,
what
right.
I'm doing.
He spent 10 years writing a
Yeah.
script. And,
But tell us about what you're working on, especially with the new referendum that's coming up.
all right,
On
so
a lot of people's minds right now.
right, so the cannabis stuff. So I've been no. Um, for a project last semester, I kind of worked on a platform around drug reform and the consequences of when societies have drug reform. So I wasn't really looking at specific drugs and what they do, but kind of like looking at Portugal when they decriminalized, looking at states in America when they legalized marijuana, and when I'm kind of pulling these threads, looking at articles, you know, like most people do, how they get their news, right? Just Google topic, hit the Herald or whatever it is, and then kind of looking deeper into academia and studies and pulling away these layers. It's so complex and yet, displayed and communicated so black and white, and it's been politicized obviously because of referendum, and that's just, it's muddied the water so much that, you know, they say, you know, it's either good or bad, but it's kind of neither, right? It's a very gray topic, and they make you pick a yes or a no when it's like, it's not as simple as a yes or a no.
Honestly, because I had the great opportunity of reading the content, and it was honest as that. I don't know. I haven't. I'm not a user, so to say that. I know a lot of people that are. I know a lot of people that aren't. I've seen both views, and again, it is a very complicated topic. Whether we should allow it to be sold like it is, like cigarettes are or alcohol is, that's another topic. But it is very complicated, and the social implication of such decisions weighs heavily on politicians. And at the end of the day, we could see after the fact of when the damage is done, be like, well, we could have done this and that. But again, we got to now start thinking, why do we have to always do it after the fact? You know, could it not be critically thought about right now without politics? Let's look at just the social science of it, of understanding if the aim of society is the highest amount of good for all the people. That is a philosophy in itself.
Yeah.
If that is the aim of government or whoever, the state, then you can understand, would it serve the most people and give them the most benefits as possible? Because there is a very, very negative consequence of abusing drugs.
100%.
Higher domestic abuse rate, higher rates of unemployment. The list can go on and on. Happens with alcohol. Someone might say, well, alcohol is legal. Of course, fucking alcohol. If you look at the stats, it's one of the worst drugs that have ever been in our society. We don't do anything about it because it's cultural. You know, it's in our culture.
Then there's a very interesting kind of topic there when they took away alcohol and prohibition and created a black market for it.
Yeah.
So then that kind of points to the state of what certain drugs are like now and what it's like when you take away something that culture's already kind of accompanied with. You know, when they took away alcohol, what happened was, instead of like light beers and wines, people went to the harder spirits, higher concentrated quantities of it. And yeah, it was still around.
Yeah.
But then you fall into a trap of like false equivalencies, and that you can make like a rebuttal like that, but does that equate to exactly what you were getting at? And it's just another like nuance to the debate. When people compare weed to alcohol, it's just a completely different ballgame.
Yeah. You know, people that use it might say, "Oh, I'm the calmest person."
Yeah.
And probably are, like, for sure.
Yeah.
Do whatever you need to. But it's like, I think you have to ask the question. It's like, have you really sat down and thought about all the facts on the table? Like all of it from both sides, not just one side of what you will believe in, and really thought about, okay, will this do the most harm or the most good in society?
Yeah,
It's not going to be like it's not going to be a straightforward answer. There's going to be a sort of a like a 70-30 or 80-20. Who knows?
It is a very tricky one. And it is about the intention of the policymakers. Do we want a society where you have the most amount of people succeeding as much as they can? But then how do you set the ground rules that can happen in a way that people have personal freedoms, blah 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 blah. You know, it becomes tricky, even and at that level, how you approach these things.
Of course, like like no one really can understand it at like such a high level as well. It's interesting. I don't know. I have no answer.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I don't even know if I'm gonna vote in that. I don't know, to be honest,
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
No, it was crazy because I spent weeks and weeks and weeks or nothing really in terms of study, but really going at everybody's intentions and the way they're displaying the information, nuances to every kind of side of it, or as many sides as I could get to. And then someone would ask me, "Well, you've done all that. How are you going to vote?" And I'm like, "Look, I'm more confused as ever."
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of that Dunning-Kruger thing where like you don't know much about the topic you feel the most confident about, and the more you learn about it, you're like, "Oh, dude, I know so much." Little compared to now what I'm aware of is out there. Yeah,
because you are
it's tricky.
exposed to non-events. Because before, when I have not done enough research, I can only see
what you know of.
only like a small horizon.
Mhm.
However, if I went deep into it, that horizon is fucking opened up.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, dude.
And I think that is the reason why most people don't want to sit down and really think about it. It's hard. No one's gonna say it's easy to,
make a call like
just
that.
make your civil duty of researching. No, I don't think 90% of people will. I doubt 95% will really sit
look at
down
it.
and objectively, not biasly, objectively assess it.
Yeah.
It is a.
And even if your intention is to objectively, and you're well intentioned in your research, look at it. What you're looking at to make those decisions have their own biases in themselves.
Sure.
So academia is full of references to papers that are biased, and then you're using that to kind of get your ground understanding for your literature review before you do your own study, and that's based on.
That's why they say social science is a fucking joke.
It's really hard to get an objective kind of look at a thing like that. It's wild.
Yeah, but then there's another like topic as well. It's like objectivity and subjectivity. Like when people argue about subjective things, such as who likes what show,
what band is better.
you know, it is a stupid argument. It's a stupid argument because, again, subjective. Your likes and preferences are not like based in no one
facts,
can see it. There's no. I doubt there is a logical prevalence of why you chose that. There might be genetic influences, there might be environmental factors.
100%.
However, when we're talking objectively, such as hard sciences of whether physics, there is like truth. There is Newton's truth. There's Einstein's truth.
But then you kind of look at the scientific process. It's always about questioning those truths, anyways, to make those discoveries. I think people fall into a trap of science is meant to be objective, but then the scientific process in itself is to question those realities, and that's how you kind of get that. And 9 times out of 10, nothing's gonna change.
Yeah. There's a very, very great author named Nassim Taleb. He wrote the Black Swan, Anti-Fragile. Very, very good author. You guys should check it out. Very, very good thinker as well. And he talks about this. He talks about these topics. He talks about how complicated systems are often politicized into being binary decisions. Yeah. How most people do not have critical thinking.
I mean, that's how it appears on your ballot. It's a yes or a no, right?
Exactly.
It's a binary thing right there.
Yeah, and it's weird because, this guy can assess, whether certain decisions are made from emotional or calculated, objective things. Because whether we like it or not, our emotions have an influence on our decision-making process. It's scary, though. Very scary. Yeah. Especially we know this fact. And now think about your politicians. Think about who's in charge,
Yeah.
and look at your bosses.
Yeah.
Okay, now look at your employers, bosses, politicians, whoever's in some form of power. If they're being heavily influenced on their emotional state,
Mm.
that's a worrying factor.
Yeah, I feel like we look at politicians like they're like mystical beings, but they are just a government is just a group of people like me and you
Exactly.
that we've just won a popularity contest, and now we can debate
Exactly.
topics that.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's nuance into those kind of thoughts as well, but it is they're people.
But now, like, let's look at the significance of that statement of emotional bias.
Mm.
Like, there's probably countless of studies. Maybe look it up. Whatever emotional state it is, you're more likely to make a certain decision based on that state,
Right.
which makes you think is that the objective thing you're assessing does not matter as much as the emotional state you're in,
Well, you're right. Yeah.
which makes you really question it. It's like truths are whatever the person making the decision really thinks it is,
Yeah.
without really, I could be one day I could be very angry and really, pissed off. I'll make a different decision
Mm.
about this objective sort of thing I need to do, compared to when one day I'm very up mood,
Slept
inspired,
well,
whatever, slept
yeah.
well, makes you think.
Yeah.
Makes you think how many bad decisions were made because people were pissed off. Like, think about it,
Yeah. Yeah.
how many bankruptcies has happened because envy, jealousy,
Oh yeah.
these things took over. You gotta think, and you're like, wow, fuck, man, we are kind of fucking screwed.
Yeah. It's tough. I kind of been debating this back and forth, and that. Oh, my dog's here. It's really easy to kind of see the world in that when you start thinking about these topics in like a real negative way, and it's like it can't overburden you in that. Is it just recency bias that we're in a time right now which is so overwhelming, or has it always kind of been like this and we're kind of just more exposed to it?
Nah, to be honest,
I don't know.
I think, nah.
Because like the argument's always been, well, from what I've heard, it's like we're in the
Mm.
best time in human history
Yeah.
ever. Because
We
if you
are.
look back in history,
We are. Like,
it's
it's objectively, we are. Like,
Yeah.
people might say otherwise, but yeah, recency bias.
Yeah.
Because we experience it,
we're
think,
living in it.
we think it's going bad. But
Yeah.
no, read the book Steven Pinker, or maybe other books as well if you don't really like the author.
Yuval Noah Harari, I think.
Yeah, Noah
spoken about
Harari.
it, yeah.
You can objectively see that right now we are living in the best time.
Mm.
If not, the best time right now. How much medicine has improved, how much social equality has improved, how much just your overall hygiene has improved. Fuck, man.
Living
Think
conditions,
about it.
yeah.
Think about it. You realize we are living in one of the best times.
Mm.
Maybe we don't seem like it because of our emotional state.
Yeah.
Because we are fed this, the news, BBC, NZ Herald, constantly feeding us
Yeah.
some form of stuff, yeah.
Yes, it is just stuff, isn't it? Like,
I don't know, man.
how
you
many
gotta question
stories
it.
can you make a day? Jesus Christ.
You gotta question it. It's like it's a weird thing. It's like I think when people realize we are living in one of the greatest times of our era, yet that's not to say we don't have problems. Right?
No, it's not
See,
to
again,
discredit
people will-
people's experience.
Yeah, people would
and-
try to take a binary of because we're living in the best time, we should have the best thing that's possible.
Yeah.
No, it's a relativeness of our previous history. That said, it's we now have to look way into the future.
Yeah, and it's just ways of framing things, right? When when we talk about this thing, it's just a way of looking at things.
Mm.
It's not necessary. It's not to discredit.
And this problem
Struggles.
we just the outline of emotional bias. Guess who's not emotional?
AI.
Computers.
Yeah.
They are not emotional,
Ugh.
which means that they have a predictable action based on the inputs you've put in it. Very predictable.
And once it gets to the point where you're not even putting the inputs in, because obviously, I guess the next step is that it's like, who's putting the inputs? Got emotional bias.
Exactly.
Once it scales to a point where it's just looking at the world as
Yeah.
it is.
Okay. There is biases. Not to say. Okay. algorithms have biases.
Mm.
This can be depicted all over because of the data set they're training.
Yeah.
However, humans have worse biases.
Yeah.
Okay, we think like
Or biological.
we think like just because computers have flaws that they are nowhere near humans.
Superior, yeah.
Well, bro, humans are racist, humans are misogynistic, humans are all of the above. Yet, we make a lot of the mistakes that could be prevented if a machine were making the decision. You know,
Dude, that's scary.
whether or not we should hire someone, you can quantify that.
I mean, in terms of like, let's take drug reform. How wild is it to think that potentially it would just be a case of asking a computer, and that makes the call for the society? Maybe it is more objective, but like, that's a scary thought.
Yeah, but like I don't think we're there now
No.
for the fact, but it could be, yeah. If you give it certain criteria to optimize on, because algorithms are optimization fucking geniuses. You tell them, okay, there is this problem, and I need to optimize on the health of the community. So health is a big priority.
Yeah.
You weight it at like maybe 60%. Second thing is economic. You weight that at 20-30%. The rest is something else.
Yeah.
The algorithm will generate possible scenarios or possible events that could, or possible solutions, and calculate which is the best optimized for your preference. We have to understand that optimization is not like a perfect game, but like we have to have constraints of what we're gonna value, and if that's what we're gonna value, we have to really think carefully about, you know.
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah, man. Perks of studying computer science, guys.
Yeah.
Get into it.
I could never, man. Too much.
Nah, it's been good, bro. But another announcement we have to make. We've decided to change the name of the podcast to Bunch of Thoughts. It has a subtle meaning. I think the podcast has evolved in sort of what type of content we want to create. Initially, the aim was sort of more of a motivational sort of type of podcast. But as you grow older, you realize, you know, certain things that you get influenced by certain people, and you start to. So, in short, sort of the content we're creating has sort of changed. It's no longer wholly motivational, yet it could be, but it's more about discussing complex topics with very, very well-renowned people and having a great discussion about that. And I think that's why we chose to sort of change the name and change the branding of the podcast.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Like, just the growth from 2 years ago to now, where it is. It's a different show.
Yeah.
If you look at our first few episodes, like, it's still an interview with, you know, interesting people who are experts in their fields, but it's just just the approach to it.
Oh, for sure, it is.
Yeah.
And I like it this way. Maybe in 2 years it might be different. Who knows? It might be a rock band podcast. Who knows? But for now, that's like sort of where we are. And yeah, like first few podcasts, so scared, man. I was very nervous. Didn't know how to, had to write all my questions down.
Yeah.
But one thing you learned when you really interview people is like listening, how to become like an active listener. It's like a constant training factor. It's like you have to, when you listen, you really engage with them, and when you're engaging with them, they realize you're engaging with them, and they engage even more. And it's like, you know, it's very hard to do. That's one of the things we haven't done in Zoom interviews, is because I don't know,
It's loss of a personal connection.
Yeah, and you know, it doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel right with the
And you get
setting.
lag and stuff. You talk over each other. And
Exactly. You don't know like the subtleness of when he's about to open his mouth. I can just see it, so I can, you know, held back. You know. So these sort of things. But no, it's been awesome. You know, working with you and doing all this stuff. And again, it's like a passion project. We do it once a month. Try to at least once a month to get a podcast out. But yeah, with the pandemic going on,
makes things hard.
make things much harder. Yeah, but
Actually, why this is not actually on the 2 year dot. 'Cause
Yeah,
we went to level
exactly,
3
yeah.
like
Yeah.
the day before we were gonna make this.
Exactly. Any parting thoughts, Denny?
No, I'm just looking forward to the next 2 years.
Yeah, man. It'll be good. It'll be good. Stay tuned, guys. Ciao.
Peace.